Welcome to Alternative Dog Moms Podcast. I'm Kimberly Gauthier, the creator of Keep the Tail Wagging. For the past 9 years, I've been blogging about raw feeding, pet wellness, and life as a crazy dog mom. I've seen massive improvements in my dog's health since I started raising my dogs naturally, and I'm passionate about sharing my experience to help other pet parents.
I'm Erin Scott. For the past 9 years, I've been researching and learning everything I can about healing cancer, allergies, autoimmune, and mystery illnesses in both my dogs and myself, and I can't wait to share with you everything I've learned on this journey. As the Alternative Dog Moms, we're bringing you all the latest dog health news that we're following and sharing the tips, tricks, and resources we learn along the way. Now, let's get started. Kimberly.
Hello, Erin.
How are you tonight?
I'm doing pretty good.
Yeah?
Pretty good. Living. We have sunshine still, and it's, nice temperatures, not hot, but, we're having a nice fall. And so I'm pretty excited about that. I'm not ready for the rain to return.
It was gorgeous here in Baltimore today, I have to say, after we were inundated with a biblical flood for several days. It's nice to have the sunshine back and feel human again.
Yes. I was just thinking when you said biblical, I was watching YouTube videos earlier, and someone was commenting on another video where a woman brought her boyfriend onto a TikTok or something to question him about why he hasn't proposed to her. And it was so cringe and uncomfortable. And I left a comment that it's forcing someone into a commitment doesn't guarantee, happiness and longevity and stuff. And I just said, my first marriage, I was so interested, so focused on getting married, getting that ring. And 5 years later, we're divorced. This time I just could care less. And, 17 years later, we're still together. So it's just sort of I don't know, maybe it's about mindset. It's not for everyone. Well, a woman kept commenting about, well, not everyone can do what you're doing. I am Christian and I believe in God and I can't be with someone unmarried because that is just sinning. And I was just yeah, no one told you that you have to do that. My point is that if we force people into a commitment, it doesn't guarantee happiness. That's all. No, I completely understand. What I'm telling you is that I am a Christian. And other people even joined in saying, you're missing the point. No, I'm not. And finally, I was just I'm not telling you how to live your life. I'm just sharing the choices that I've made and what I've learned from those choices. You do whatever you have to do. I am also a Christian, and I feel that God has led me to this blessed life. So my point is simply that if you force it, it won't guarantee happiness. And then she comes back and goes, oh, I did misunderstand you. And it was the weirdest conversation. But it's one of those things where this is why I love and hate social media, the confusion and the disagreements and stuff. But it is kind of cool when someone comes back and goes, oh, I get it.
So I am not a big Twitter person at all, but every once in a while there are people who I look on Twitter just to see if they've had anything interesting to say lately, because that's where they're most active. And so in a crazy comment thread, I found the best quote ever that I have seen to describe social media in my entire life. And I have screenshotted it and saved it to my desktop. So I'm going to read you this quote because I think you'll appreciate it. It says, "Excuse me, but your post describing your experience failed to consider my very specific circumstances in what I can only assume is an intentional attack on me."
That is so true. Oh my God, it's so perfect.
And, they were posting it as this very sort of tongue-in-cheek thing, but I was just amen. This is why I don't get involved on a lot of social media stuff.
It's just so funny because, I tell myself, and whether or not this is true or not, it doesn't matter. I tell myself, because this is how I'm able to keep doing what I'm doing, is I repeatedly tell myself that everyone means the best. No one is actually jumping on social media. I would say not everyone is jumping on social media to be an absolute tool, to troll, to bully. I think that where it happens is we have this huge disconnect where people feel attacked if you don't agree with them. Like they get so much validation from strangers on social media. And I'll admit, I used to as well. I mean, it feels good when someone comes and tells you, I agree with you. That makes great sense. What a good point, Kimberly. I mean, it's sort of like when you're in school and you raise your hand and your professor or your teacher commends you on that in front of everyone. It feels good. But it's just sort of like it's not the way, you don't get that every single day. And what I find is I had someone send me a message a few days ago telling me she was no longer going to follow me anymore because no matter what she said, I was going to find problems with it and I was going to come for her and attack her. I have no idea who this person is. I went through my comments just to find like, where did this come from? She said something, she posted something on a thread, and I felt that she misunderstood what I was saying because what she said was not what I was saying. And so I just said, this is what I am referring to. And this is what I mean. And this is based on my experience. And just, I thought we were having a discussion, but then she came back and said, well, I said this and you responded clarifying yourself. But when this other person said something almost similar, you said, good point. And I don't understand why I didn't get a
So, I see so much of this on social media, and I always have to joke because I'm just like, I'm such a, I'm an introvert in person, and I'm also like a social media introvert who doesn't like go around like commenting a lot on things. And, I just feel like that falls into the category of like, it's not you, it's them,
Yes, exactly. Well, it's one of those where something is obviously going on in that person's day, week, or life. And they're upset and triggered by whatever the case may be. And I have learned not to, once someone sends me a message to say, I am no longer, I don't even bother finishing the sentence. I ban them. Because what I have found is that they never actually go away. They just get quiet for a few hours and then they come back. They're waiting.
Lying in wait.
Exactly. That's exactly how I feel about her. And I was like, no, we're not going to do this. So whenever I've reached a point with people, because one person told me, well, the Queen of England that recently passed away. I actually don't know if this is true or not, but someone told me that one thing that she always says is never complain, never explain. And I always love that. And it's something that I've always kept in the back of my head, never complain, never explain. So someone kept saying to me, Kimberly, stop explaining yourself. And it's like, no, I'm not explaining in the way that you think. I'm clarifying. And I think that that's beneficial for a conversation. If we're having a conversation and you have no idea what I'm talking about, but I'm like, never complain, never explain, we're never going to get anywhere in this conversation. So I don't mind clarifying myself and going back and forth a little bit. And because we are on social media and we're just reading each other's words. So sometimes we have to filter through some preconceived notions and all of that to get to the points, similar to the conversation about marriage that I was talking about. I think that she was so focused on one thing, like that I was telling her or telling the world, this is how you need to live, not understanding that, no, that's not what I was doing. What I was saying is that there's no guarantees. And then it was like, oh, okay.
Right.
And I think that sometimes it takes a little bit of a back and forth to get to there. But in some cases, people feel so attacked if someone does not agree with them that they cannot shake themselves out of that space of feeling defensive and feeling like they have to defend every single thing that they're doing or saying. And it's one of those where we don't have to argue. We can just sit and have a conversation. There's no one is telling you that you have to do anything. No one's telling me that I have to do anything. We can just have a chat. But it's interesting to me that and I think the thing that frustrates me the most is it's always women. We are so notoriously mean to each other and we come for each other like you wouldn't believe. And I truly think it's because we never were taught how to have conversations and disagree without it feeling like this whole mean girl, I'm being bullied you're attacking me type of situation. Whereas boys through, I mean, I shouldn't say all girls or all women, but I feel like with boys, they're taught how to shake hands and shake it off and move on from a young age. Whereas we're taught to be quiet and pretty and cute while we're growing up watching the women in our lives, gossip. and again, not all guys, not all women, but I wonder if that's the reason why we have such a hard time with each other on social media.
I was just laughing to myself because I was thinking of my brother, and I remember my brother was about 5 or 6 years old, and he was like in a fight with this other kid in his class. Oh, it was at the bus stop. That's what it was. So they came up into our front yard and wrestled and were like punching at each other. I mean, it was just little kids stuff. And then they were like best friends after that.
Yeah.
And it's like, girls could never, ever be like that.
Yeah. I knew kids. I think it was Tommy and Mike when I was a kid, I was in the 7th grade, Tommy and Mike. And it was, in fact, we're so dramatic as children. I mean, oh my God. So they were best friends all their lives. And then I don't know what happened, but they were mad at each other. And so they were going to have a fight after school. And it was you would think that we were going to send out invitations and +1s the way this was, because it couldn't be on campus. It was private school. Catholic school, couldn't be on campus. So we were going to go up the street and around a corner because we couldn't go in this area because some neighbors would be home and they'd probably call our teachers or whatever. So we'll go here. And then it was just them staring at each other. We're all around, sort of like fight, and it was really lots of red faces and madness and punches. And it was kind of silly. And then when they were done. And that was the end of it. I mean, it was just like, it was so pointless. And I think they just went on and they were friends again. And maybe back then I knew why they were fighting, but for the life of me, I cannot remember why they were fighting. And I bet you if I called one of them, I'm sure Tommy won't remember why he was fighting back in the 7th grade. But it's like now, I mean, men can be kind of trifling on social media as well. Years ago, a guy, he was an admin of a raw feeding group, and he kicked me out of the raw feeding group because I wanted to know, I knew that they were not proponents of feeding vegetables to dogs, but then they would say, it's okay if you're feeding them for fiber. So I was confused because it was like one admin would say this and another admin would say that. And I was still in my first few years of raw feeding. So I'm just sort of like, so which is it? Which is right? And he decided that the only reason why I was asking the question was to stir up drama. So he kicked me out of the group. And so, okay, it was actually on my way on a flight someplace. When I got off the plane, my friend Tina had texted me to say, did you leave the group or did you get kicked out again? Because I used to get kicked out of groups all the time. And I was like, I guess I got kicked out again. So I was just sort of like, okay, and then the guy started messaging me, just harassing me about feeding vegetables to dogs, just harassing me. And I'm just like, dude, it's your group. It's fine. Just leave me alone. And he wouldn't leave me alone. So I blocked him. Well, I guess he had like 3 or 5 spare accounts that he used because he was so used to people blocking him.
Oh my God.
But he used the same name and the same profile pic on each account, which I don't understand why Facebook allowed that because it's totally against their terms of service. But he would just start messaging me. But what's even funnier is that he would start messaging me from another account and he would say, hey, you blocked me on the other account, but I had to create others because people keep doing that to me. So, I mean, as if it was like he wasn't bothered or it wasn't like, you blocked me because I'm assuming you don't want to hear from me anymore. It was more of like, oops, you blocked me, but don't worry. I got multiple other accounts so we can keep our conversation going. And then just kept attacking me. So blocked again. And then he'd come back. Hey, it's me again. And it was just like, oh my God.
That's where, I mean, it's hilarious. It's insane sounding, but you just wonder if there's some kind of, I don't know, personality situation going on there, diagnosed or undiagnosed situation.
It has to be. It really has to be. But what was even funnier is that eventually he got kicked out of his group by the other admins And to get even, I guess because they had I don't guess, they did. They had a message chain where they would just talk crap about people, and they were vicious. So he went and screenshot the entire message chain, created a new group that was public, and just started posting the message chain.
Wow.
And it was like literally sitting at the computer with popcorn. And it's like one of those things where what was funny about the whole the thing with the message chain was I think of that in other times when we bicker within our community. And then I think about people saying, the kibble industry, they're so afraid of us. They're worried that they're going to lose money to us. And I'm like, if they're watching what I'm watching, they are not afraid. They're not worried about us, because it's like, and that's what Karen Becker, I think it was a 2018 or 2019 Super Zoo. She spoke, did one of their courses, spoke for one of their courses on the Monday before everything starts. And one of the kibble execs, she got into a conversation with, and he said to the effect, because she repeated it to us, that he was like, yeah, it's like, we're not worried about you guys. He's like, you guys will burn yourselves down before we can get a hold of you. It's pointless for us to do anything, because it's like, you guys don't get along. You guys are like a reality TV show. And I think part of that is true. I don't think that they're that, ambivalent to raw feeding.
Yeah, I agree.
But it is kind of like, it's true in that, we do air our dirty laundry on social media, and it doesn't happen at least I don't see it as often as I used to see it, but it is there.
I'll just say that one of the worst experiences I've had on Facebook has involved men. And it has involved, I was like in a group for like a band that I liked. And it was a group where people would like make and share memes about this band. And I shared something I found that I thought was funny. And I got like blown up for like not understanding the point by all these guys. And I just kind of kept my mouth shut. I'm not going to argue with anybody on social media. So like 6 months later, a guy posted the same meme that I had like 6 months before, and people were like laughing their asses off that it was like the funniest thing they had ever said.
Oh my God.
So I left the group at that point. Now, I just quietly left. I'm not somebody that's like, I'm leaving the group now because blah, blah, blah.
And I'm going to report you to Facebook.
Yeah. But it was just there's a weird thing amongst guys that like certain bands, and, like that they don't like girls who are into that kind of music, or they don't think that girls are real fans, or, that kind of like name 3 songs that this band did, or, that was like my whole life growing up. So anyway, it was just like I don't need that in my life. Like I just joined this to have a laugh every once in a while about this band that I, started listening to 30 years ago. Yeah.
Well, that's what's so funny. I'm always curious about how much time do you have? I call it boredomitis, where it's like, you've got to be so bored right now. And I get it. There are days when I'm bored, but I usually just turn on television.
I'm never bored. I mean, I always have like 87 books I'm in the middle of reading, or like something to watch.
There's so much to do.
Yeah.
But, I figured, maybe we're the blessed ones, because there are a lot of bored people. Speaking of boredom, that's why I wanted to talk to you guys about raw feeding models. So I'm wrapping up my book. And in this new version of my book, I have a whole section. It's funny because the first version of my book, it was sort of like prey model, barf model. This section is prey model, barf model, frank and prey, frank and barf. I think I actually had franken in there on the first one. But then there's the NRC, and there's rotational monofeeding. And it's interesting because I don't feel like, and there's keto. There's keto, which, it's not really a model, but it should go in there too. But I never go into, I'm not married to one model. I can give you pros and cons of everyone, based on my experience with my dogs and, what I'll take from it and what I won't take for it. And I figure, that's reasonable to me. But what I found this weekend as I'm bickering with this wonderful woman, about my attack on nutrients, as she called it, my backlash, the backlash I have created against nutrients. And she built her entire business around NRC, and she follows NRC, which is perfectly fine as far as I'm concerned. I just don't think that there's just one single way to reach balance. I think that for those of us who don't use the NRC guide or don't understand it, which is me, it's nice that there are other ways that I can make sure that my dogs are getting their nutritional needs without cracking open a big, thick book or software or spreadsheets. So I was wondering, what are your thoughts on just the various models out there?
Well, as much as I love raw feeding, I also love convenience. And I feel very fortunate that I'm able to, afford to buy the pre-made brands that are out there. So, I'm sure most of what we feed would be, I guess, kind of like a Frankenbarf type model, and we rotate between some different brands and we rotate between some different proteins. I love the idea of DIY. I have spent more time than you'd think looking into it for somebody who's never actually fed their dogs that way. If I was, if I had the wherewithal to execute that, I would probably fall into a more balance over time, within like a week or so,
Yeah.
But yeah, I would probably go in that direction because that makes sense to me. And I know how I feed myself. I'm not getting everything every single day, but and I really love the nutrient testing idea to kind of make sure that what I think is working, is actually working.
Yeah. And it's interesting because I figure we're going with everything that we have access to. Everyone is figuring it out as they go along. I think that we are close. We have a good idea of what dogs need, but then when we get down to each individual dog and how each one absorbs nutrients, I have one dog that doesn't absorb any unless I add a digestive enzyme. Right. I have a husky mix, so I don't know if he might need more zinc than my other dogs, but so far he's doing fine. And then I have my third super healthy, wonderful dog, Zoe, that has no issues whatsoever, knock on wood. But all three of them digest food differently and absorb nutrients differently. So, ultimately, I try not to stress out when it comes to feeding a balanced diet. I do the best that I can, and I stay open to new information so that I can adapt and adjust. But I just won't stress out. And I like DIY because I found a way that's easy. I would not like DIY if I was trying to do it solely with food. It's too much to think about. And although I know that there are people out there that are like, no, it's still super easy. I know me, and I know that I would overthink things. And so using a base mix for me with 80-10-10 is how I don't overthink things.
Yeah. And I don't think anybody's wrong for what they're doing. I just know what I would start at and then observe my dogs, nutrient test my dogs, see how they're doing. For instance, Penny does really great on fish. And when she was having a health crisis a couple years ago, like she probably ate fish for 6 or 8 months straight without anything else in there because that was the only thing that she wasn't reacting to at that time before we could start introducing some other things again.
Yeah.
It's hard to do fish as a DIY.
Yeah.
But like Nino does great on like turkey and pork and he can do some lamb here and there, but like we stick to that like almost like in the winter months. And but like Penny can do some turkey, but like we can't really do lamb with her, so because of the way that they've reacted to different things, like neither one of them can have chicken. Nino's all right in beef. Penny can't really do beef. Like, to me, it's just easier to makes my life easier to buy it.
Yeah, it is. Well, and it's like I've been lucky because I've only had one dog that had really, noticeable protein sensitivities. But if I'm juggling between a couple of diets and, trying not to be a short order cook with my dogs, it kind of is. Like when I went out of town, I had Darwin's and everyone, I think Rigo had beef, Zoe had beef, Apollo, who doesn't always like beef recipes on commercial raw, he had turkey. So everyone was fine. And it was easy to do. I didn't have to. And also because I buy everything in bulk, it really sucks to buy a new protein. It's not something that I often do. That's not tested. When I had a house of 4 or 5 dogs, it was really not an issue because the food would get fed.
Somebody would eat it.
Yeah, someone's going to eat this food. But now that we're down to 3, I have to be careful about, I just don't mess with new proteins anymore unless I can get a small amount where I can try it out with the dogs for a week to see how they do and how they like it. But same thing with new commercial brands. I don't bother that much anymore for the same reason because I don't know if I'm going to buy 2 cases of something and only one dog will eat it. I mean, but on the flip side, I have bought 2 cases of something for one dog. So Rodrigo, there's one brand that I got a really great deal on, and I bought 3 cases of food, and I'm so happy because it's lasting. It's interesting to me, and what I'm getting is a lot of, there was the raw feeding summit this past weekend. So I'm getting a lot of new followers from participating in that summit. And the biggest question that I'm having from people is how to get started. So there's 2 things going on. 1, people want to know how to get started. And 2, people don't want it to be complicated. And so when they're meeting people who are telling them about, well, you have to have this level of vitamin A and you need to worry about the vitamin E and they're going through all of this. And it's not that stuff isn't important. It's just that to someone who's brand new, it can be overwhelming.
And I'm one of those people who finds it very overwhelming. I am.
Yeah. And it's like, I'm a numbers person. I love a good spreadsheet, but the whole nutrient stuff it's just it's too much. And I would love to sit down. Like I'm going to start taking courses in meal formulation and animal nutrition. But even then I'm trying to go very slowly. So I'm starting at, hey, this is what dog food is, and working my way to something a little more complicated. And, and I've heard from a few people who don't mind it. They love understanding the science behind why they're doing what they do. But it's one of those where, know your audience. And this world in which people are so adamant that we have to do things this way, I think that I respect their passion. I respect their experience and knowledge, but I think that they are missing out on so many pet parents because they're expecting them to be perfect on day 1 when many of us aren't perfect on day 366.
Yeah.
So it's just sort of allow people to, a friend of mine who used to own a pet store, she used to say, meet people where they are.
Yeah.
Rather than dragging them to where you are and expecting them to stay there.
And then, judging or condemning them when they're not.
Yes, exactly. I think that's the hardest part. And I still go back to, which is something that I don't know if this is true or not, but I think when people start out trying to share information and help people, they have the most altruistic intentions. But I think, as we go through, because I don't know everyone's story and what made them so passionate. But, if you're for instance, with rotational monofeeding, I know that group is very passionate and they're seeing all these dogs who are thriving on this diet. And so, of course, they're just like, here it is. And you just got to do it and you got to do the work. But on the flip side, if a dog is getting sicker and sicker while trying to follow this diet, does it help to to encourage them to toe the line? Or should we be, cut that one loose and say, hey, maybe this isn't a good fit for your dog? Because ultimately that story of a dog starving to death, whether it be because of the rotational monofeeding or some absolutely different circumstances that we know nothing about, that's the story that's going to catch fire and people are going to talk about, because people love drama and people love even I'm, tempted to be like, ooh, what happened?
Well, I just think of people, right? Like, so my husband and I have been doing this keto diet for almost 2 months now, and he's down 20 pounds, and I'm down like 10 or 11 pounds. And like, I totally believe that this is like the exact diet that he needs. He's had so many benefits from it. I'm not 100% convinced it's the best diet for me. I think I actually can eat more carbs, and need to eat more carbs than he does to feel better. So it's something I've been playing around with. I have a friend who's a huge animal advocate, and she's also does like weightlifting and bodybuilding, like not in those weird posing competitions or anything, but so she was vegan for several years, and that was what fit with her values of animal welfare, but her body started falling apart. She couldn't keep up the weightlifting and the exercise at the level she was doing because her body needed more protein to do and a different type of protein and amino acid profiles to be able to heal itself from all of the physical activity. So she did have to go back to eating meat, and now she works with local farmers and that, raise animals very humanely.
Yeah.
But it's like, I know people who thrive at being a vegan, that it clears up medical issues for them, but there's other people for whom it doesn't work for. And like, everybody's, chemistry is so different, or what our body needs is so different. And of course, look at dogs. They come in even more shapes and sizes and breeds and, things than people, the range of sizes in dogs. So of course it makes sense to me that like some dogs do amazing on rotational mono feeding and that heals them. But you know what? Other dogs are amazing on the prey model and other, and I think that there's room for everything. And you always talk about, feed the dog in front of you, and people are telling me what my dog needs, but they've never asked me anything about my dog. And, so I think that is some of the danger of social media. And actually, I wanted to just mention something else about social media while we're on the topic. So I understand that not everybody has access to holistic veterinarians. I understand that even if you might have one in your town, maybe you can't afford it. And, a lot of people go online, go in these different groups to seek out information for their dog, especially if there's veterinarians that are active in the group. And it seems that there's a lot of unreasonable expectations about what veterinarians can do through social media.
I agree.
And, they can't diagnose your dog. Even veterinarians who do telehealth consults, some states don't allow them to do telehealth if they've never physically seen or examined your dog first.
Yeah.
Some veterinarians can only do telehealth consults, like working with your veterinarian, in partnership. They can't even work with you directly, again, because they've never seen and examined your dog. And, their license is on the line for these things. Their livelihood is on the line for these things. And, to be asking questions in social media groups and expecting, these 3-paragraph long things and tagging veterinarians and thinking they're going to solve all your problems and then getting upset when they don't. I literally saw this over this past weekend, and 3 years ago I DM'd this veterinarian and she never responded to me and my dog died. And I just think that's so unfair.
It is.
It's so unfair.
I actually had someone ask me recently because, she's having a bad time finding a veterinarian. It's just very anti-veterinarian right now. And I was trying to just explain that, veterinarians are limited on what they can do. And so before you assume that they just don't want to treat your dog or they just don't want to listen to you, actually maybe ask them why. Like if you say, hey, what about this? I was looking online and the symptoms seem similar. And if they say, no, that's not it. And can you explain why it was? And, if they have the time, and in my experience, they will, because sometimes for some people, they're okay with their veterinarian going, oh yeah, don't worry about it. And they're like, okay. And other people may want a little more information, but it's kind of, I think it's a slippery slope that people don't realize that if a veterinarian helps you and diagnoses something publicly and your dog dies, you could potentially, even if the case gets thrown out, you can sue them, you can come after them, and you can absolutely destroy them with a lawsuit. And people do get very, very litigious when it comes to our dogs. And I get it. I love my animals and I'm very protective of them. But you also just don't want to take a risk. When you can give a veterinarian all the information that you can think of, but there are things that a veterinarian can see and they know to check just intuitively from experience and education that you wouldn't even think to ask them about that. Like with Apollo's butt, I thought it was a yeast issue and it was something that I can't even pronounce. And turns out that, I'm thinking that I'm going to have to do like this huge diet change and oh my gosh, and I can't believe my dog has yeast. Where did it come from? And it wasn't a yeast problem whatsoever. It was a husky problem. And it was really quick and easy to resolve. But that's not something that I would have known, or even there's no way I would have gone down this rabbit hole to come to that conclusion.
And thank you for not posting a picture of his butt and putting it in a Facebook group and saying, does anybody know what this is?
Exactly. I did take pictures of his butt because I wanted to do a before and after.
Yeah.
But it was so unseemly and inappropriate. And I couldn't just get the skin. I couldn't, because it was all right there. And so I decided that, people are just going to have to take my word for it, that this works, because I'm not going to take a picture of my dog's butt and share it. Same thing with taking pictures of poop. And is this normal? I get it, but it's not the way I want to start the day. I've actually even had people send me poop pics and I just block them because I know it's mean. But if I wake up at the first thing I'm going to see first thing in the morning is your dog's poop, then we don't need to be connected. I think that that's rude.
Now, what I will say is that, I think there are appropriate ways to use these great Facebook groups for information, but it helps you actually have to have a diagnosis first from a veterinarian that you physically went to, and that you have an established relationship and has examined your dog. And, and then if it's EPI, for instance, like there's groups where people are explaining how they've been able to help their dogs, or, I had a friend who had a dog with mega esophagus where they have to sit in these special chairs, and they were in this Facebook group where it showed you how to build these chairs. And, and so like, there's been great ways, insulinoma, my Lucy had insulinoma, which is this extremely rare disease. There's a great Facebook group for insulinoma dogs because it's so unusual that it's hard to even find a vet who's ever even treated it before. So it's a great resource for, people dealing with something really rare like that. There's ways to use it, but yeah, actually getting a diagnosis or expecting a vet on the internet to do something that's going to save your dog's life, those are inappropriate ways, in my opinion, to use social media for veterinary advice.
And it's also, if you get turned on in the wrong direction, you just wasted a whole lot of time. Because I think that sometimes people get an answer. I see this with people who reach out to me who think that their dog has some type of condition. And so they're contacting me because they remember that I had something with one of my dogs. And so they want to know, well, exactly what happened. And I won't go into the details with them because it's like, no, because you're trying to diagnose your dog. You got to go to the vet. This is something that's serious enough that it needs a vet attention. It's not like, they have these things. I can't remember, what is it? It's like this mole. wart. It's a wart. There's these warts that dogs will get. And there's a liquid that you can buy. It's like Thuja, I think it's called.
Oh, homeopathic.
And you drop and it clears it right up and you're done. So now that's something that you can take a picture of and go, hey, does this look like this? And other people, that is so minor. But when it comes to really serious, where you're worried about, and I wonder sometimes if people are just sort of going to groups because they just want people to tell them that it's not that. Like, oh, no, that's nothing. That's just a chicken allergy. Stop feeding chicken. Your dog will be fine. And they're like, oh, okay. But it's cancer. And so it's like people are just sort of trying to get away from that diagnosis. And I can understand it. It's just so dangerous because while you're playing around in these groups trying to get an answer without going to the vet, your dog is getting sicker and sicker. And so by the time you do go to the vet, maybe it's gone from something that could have been handled to something that is more expensive to treat, or your dog is too far gone. And it just sucks because it makes me sad when I get these type of messages from people and when I see them in groups. It sucks because I can feel the desperation and the sadness, but it also is frustrating when I see 50 people jump in with no experience, not asking any questions, diagnosing the dog, because it's just like, and again, I think everyone means well, but people can't help themselves. They want to help and they think that they're being helpful, but if they're not right and this person decides that, oh, okay, well, my dog, like, oh, it must be a fatty tumor. Fatty tumors aren't a big deal, so I'm not going to go have it checked out. And it turns out, yeah, actually, you should have had that checked out. Because I know that when I felt his lymph nodes, I had tons of people telling me that it was just a fatty tumor. Don't worry about it. And because I knew that that wasn't the case, and because of the location, I knew it was the lymph nodes, and that, I don't know if it's 9 times out of 10, but it's pretty high percentage of dogs that if the lymph nodes are swollen, especially significantly swollen, then it is going to be lymphoma. And it's just not something to play around with. But yeah, people were telling me when Sydney was diagnosed with hemangiosarcoma, I had people totally giving me advice on what to do, what to give her. People I trusted and who are very smart and had tons of experience with cancer were giving me bad information because they didn't have experience with hemangiosarcoma. So I learned a woman who was kind enough to just send me a message. I never heard from her before or again, to say, do not give your dog golden paste. And it explained all the foods I could no longer give her because they prevented the body from clotting. So, and that's a danger when your dog has hemangiosarcoma. But, and again, I think people mean well, they just don't really think about the fact that you don't know. And so now there are so many things I don't respond to beyond you should go and talk to your veterinarian. And I'll tell people, like, here's a page on my site. This is all the stuff that I did and I have on there, but it's going to change because some of this stuff is going to work. Some of it's not going to work. Sometimes you're not going to know what's working. But I was going through all of these things to see what would work. Because in some cases, your dog will have a bad reaction to something that my dog did great on, and vice versa. I mean, there's nothing cut and dry. And I think it's just frustrating because, I think it was like this morning I got up and someone vomited and I didn't know who it was because I didn't hear the telltale sign. And I'm looking at all 3 of them wondering, like, which one of you guys vomited? And am I going to have to be worried? And because I'm still on the tail end of losing a dog, every time something goes wrong, I'm like, my dog is dying.
You're panicking. Yeah. I know that feeling.
Rodrigo was limping. He has bone cancer, and I mean, everything I felt, Johan's telling me about a lump. He's like, there's this lump and he's like, and it's 5 inches long. And he's telling me, and I'm just like, where is it? And it's so big. And I go and find it. It's not 5 inches long, but I can see how he felt that way. And I was just basically trying to get him to explain to me, did it move around? Was it squishy? And I had him feel like, here's a fatty tumor on Rodrigo. Did it feel like this? And he was like, yes. And then like, okay, show me where it is, and found where it is. And it's very much a fatty tumor, not 5 inches long. But it is, both of us are so on edge because we're waiting for the, the next dog to be like, hey, surprise, cancer again.
I mean, Lucy had insulinoma, which is this extremely rare form of cancer. And sometimes I look at Penny, and if she does anything that looks at all like what Lucy ever did when she was sick, like my first thing is like, oh God, like here we go again. And it's like, this is such a rare cancer. The odds of like 2 dogs and getting it is like astronomical, slim odds. But like, yeah, my mind still goes there. And anytime I hear about dogs having a seizure, especially if they're like an older dog and it's never happened before, like they don't have a history of seizures, I always suggest have your vet do a fasting blood test, because when our Lucy started having problems, she had a strange blood sugar reading and nobody picked up on it. And she continued to have seizures for 3 more months before I went to I started going to a holistic vet, and she found that reading from months ago that had been overlooked. And so I always suggest that, people do that. Just, it's very rare, but it happens. Yeah. And it's not on the list of normal causes of seizures that most vets think of.
Yeah.
So it does get into that, like, advocating, asking questions, thing that you're talking about. And vets don't always have the best bedside manner with the pet parents, and they're stressed and they've been there all day. And,
we come in there with our notes.
Right. Which I think is great. Like, but I do think if we need more information, we have to ask for more information, hopefully in a polite and respectful, manner. Yeah. Like vets, like just because they're a vet doesn't mean they're like a great people person either,
I know I'm not. So
right. I mean, like, think of how many animal people who are like, oh, I love animals, but I hate people.
Yes, I have 3 hoodies, multiple t-shirts, a tank top, and some night shirts that all say dogs because people suck. I have an entire wardrobe of that. So
like, I bet half the veterinarians out there do too. So like, it's up to us to kind of get the information.
I think it's one of those where there's this fine line between researching, because I don't think there's anything wrong with asking questions, learning as much as you can, but still keeping an open mind, because maybe you're wrong. Because it's like with my thought with my veterinarians is that they are looking at dogs and cats, but we're talking about dogs all day, every day. And this has been their career. So they've seen thousands upon thousands of dogs. They basically health-wise raise dogs from puppy to senior. And so they've seen so many cool things. I want them to tell me what they see. And if they don't know, then, I can say, well, this is what I found out. And what's interesting is I think that there is a way similar to it. There's a way to have a conversation about raw feeding without, alienating your veterinarian. Not all vets, but I think many vets would be open if you can just explain to them, or address their concerns. If you could say, okay, well, this is what I'm doing, so they're not worried. But the same thing with health is oftentimes I listen to my veterinarian and see what they have to say. And they give me all the facts, like with Rodrigo and his arthritis. I went in, I think it was Friday, and they gave me a list of, this is what we can do traditionally, this is what we can do holistically. And they didn't put any weight on either side. It was just sort of like, he's not far off or anything. He has arthritis, and it's not horrible. But they did a physical exam, explained to me what they saw, and we decided to go with laser therapy. So he had his first session yesterday.
Oh, great.
Yeah. And but it was just one of those where I went in there. I knew it was going to be some arthritis, but he has a partial cruciate tear as well, just very minor. But those are the type of things where I don't know. I can have some assumptions, but what was funny is that I was going to schedule him for a chiropractic adjustment. But then suddenly I was just like, maybe I should go in and find out if that's actually what he needs. Because if I just take him someplace and tell them, do this to my dog, and hopefully they would be like, No, let's do an exam first. But what if we can end up making something worse and there's a better option for him? And so I think that it's just a matter of keeping an open mind when talking both to people online and to your vet, because gosh, I mean, I would love to know everything, but I don't. They don't know everything.
And I think sometimes veterinarians know things that are so like second nature and common knowledge to them that like they don't go through the whole exercise of explaining it, to us, because to them it's like common sense or something. I have this because I work in a law office. Sometimes I'll come home and be, telling Tim like, oh my gosh, you're not going to believe what happened today with this motion and this. And he's like, I literally have no idea what you're talking about, because it's like this whole language that to me is second nature, but,
Yeah.
he doesn't know. And so I think there's some of that with veterinarians sometimes also.
Yeah. Exactly. And also it's like sometimes they don't want to waste, well, I should say in my experience, because I'll have my ideas, like because with Rigo, with the EPI, I've been pushing for EPI for years before he was actually diagnosed with EPI. And I'd be like, is this EPI? I keep reading about it. And I started him on these supplements and it's making it better. And they were like, no, it's not. And they just explained to me that, there are levels, like when they're testing for how many, digestive enzyme his system is producing, there are these levels. And when you get to a certain level, that's when it's like, okay, so nothing, either barely anything is in there or nothing is in there. And we're seeing digestive enzymes and they're not the ones you're putting in there. So it's just sort of like, okay, so he does have a digestive problem that requires and is helped with by adding digestive enzymes, but he doesn't have EPI. And it took some patience on my part to accept that, because I was so convinced. I had joined a group. I was reading articles. I was so convinced that my dog, I was reading all these like reviews, like my dog had this and this helped. And that's how I found the supplement. And I was convinced that this is it. Everyone is describing my dog to a T. No, there's levels of it. And so it's just like, it's not so much that I was wrong. He just wasn't that bad off. And when he was finally diagnosed, I was with a completely new vet, the vet that we're with now. And she said that he probably had low-grade pancreatitis for years. And that's what I was picking up on. But again, he didn't have the symptoms of a pancreatitis flare-up that people talk about. So, but it's like, that's the cool thing, is that they know all these things. And it's just, they're pulling this stuff like, okay, they have a whole bunch of other dogs that they can talk to and, pull from those experiences. And it's a kind of a good resource for us to have. But I can understand the frustration. It's one of those where I have to have my vet on my side. I just can't afford to alienate my vet, especially with the industry shrinking and it being, we finally reached a time where I'm actually able to get into the vet the same week that I call sometimes. But, there is a time like, well, if I were to go to a brand new vet, the appointments are still 2-3 weeks out.
Wow.
So it's just, I can't afford to lose my vet. She's awesome. I find that it's okay for me to be confident in my dogs and how I'm feeding my dogs, how I'm raising my dogs, but I have to leave a window open for new information, because if I become too laser focused on what I'm doing, ultimately I'm doing a disservice to my dogs. So I am confident in how I feed my dogs, but I'm also open to respectful feedback. You brought it up earlier, and it's something that I've said many times, because it's my biggest gripe, is people are so excited to tell you that you're wrong, but they do this without finding out if you really are wrong. And it's just like, I wish people understood there's only so much information you're going to put on social media, not because it's private, but because you don't want to write this 500-page dissertation to explain that your dog has a rash. You're probably just going to say, my dog has a rash. And then there are all these people that are going to share what they think it could be, because the last time their dog had a rash well, it was cancer, or it was the start of a hot spot, or it was a, food allergy, or they were stung by something. I mean, there's so many things that it could be. And so I think it's great to have these conversations. I just think that we lose track and we slow forward momentum when we get so focused on I'm right, you're wrong, where I honestly think even if like you and I, we could be completely disagreeing. I mean, a great example is you feed commercial raw. I do too, but I mostly feed DIY. Both of us are right.
Right.
There is no one's wrong in this. I mean, we're just different, and that's okay. And I wish I wish we can reach a point where we can say that just because someone shares an experience that's absolutely different than your own, it doesn't mean that they're telling you that you're wrong or that you're doing something bad. They're just sharing what they're doing. And if you don't agree with it for your dog, then don't do it. I mean, there are a lot of stuff about rotational monofeeding that I'm just like, yeah, no, I don't buy that. That's okay. I don't have to do it. Nora Lenz isn't at my door, telling me, that you need to stop giving fat to your dog, because no, that woman doesn't care. She's happy to share what she knows. She's happy to share the information that she has. But ultimately, for every individual pet parent on this planet, she is not stressing out about whether or not they're adding fat to their dog's diet or not. And I think the same thing is prey model raw feeders that aren't heavy on vegetables. They are not worried about the fact that I do feed my dogs vegetables. And people who, basically, I can go on and on with all these analogies, but ultimately, it's not a fight. We're not fighting. We're just different. And if we were all doing things the same way, like when we were all feeding kibble, how in the world would we grow?
Right.
But it's like whenever I meet someone that's doing something new, like going back to rotational monofeeding, it's kind of fun and exciting, because it's just like, oh, here's someone that just stepped out of the pack and just decided to go in a completely different way. And so before I'm going to judge whether or not this is going to work for my dogs, I'm going to learn as much as I can, maybe give it a try here and there, and then, take what works, leave the rest aside and move forward.
And I just love knowing everything about everything. Like, I want to know all the different ways, because you know what, a year from now, I might be in a situation where something's not working for my dogs, and I want to know what the other options are that are out there. Or, one of my friends is having a problem, and I can be like, oh, have you ever heard of this? Maybe that might help.
Exactly.
Or, here's a link to, an article I read that might be, I want to know all these things just in case I might need them in the future.
I love it. I love the sharing. I love all of that. And I think that if we can all just get back to a place, like, one thing that I was saying this weekend is like, I just want to get back to the basics, get back to a place where we're just sharing the easy stuff. And, just going back to the beginning of, when you're trying to figure out what's wrong with your dog, you're not going to pull out a huge medical journal. You're going to go back to, okay, so when was the last time my dog was fine, and what was my dog eating then? It's just kind of just stop overcomplicating everything and just get back to the basics, and then slowly work your way to where you need to be. That's all.
I like it.
Well, thanks for the chat, Erin.
Yes, before we hang up, I just want to say one thing.
Okay.
I had an interesting episode of Believe in Dog podcast come out this week. It is with animal communicator Lisa Tully, and she is from Ireland, so she has an amazing accent.
Oh, I bet.
And she's also spent time living in the Amazon rainforest. She also lived amongst the Dalai Lama's Tibetan monk community.
I'm going to listen to that tonight.
She has trained under some of the same mentors as Dr. Isla Fishburne.
Mm-hmm.
And she also has a degree in science and used to work in the pharmaceutical industry.
Oh, wow.
So we kind of talk some about like, are science and woo-woo, are these mutually exclusive? Are they, or can they all be part of the same thing? And so I thought people who listen to Alternative Dog Moms might be interested in that one too.
I'm definitely interested. I love that. Yay. Thanks for sharing.
All right. Until next time, guys.
See you later. Thanks for listening, guys.